started recording now. Now I'm going to go around, and if I'm just going to call your name out in no particular order, if that's all right. And then if you can just turn your mic on, and you can just say a bit about, just say your name and what brings you here today. Cool. Richard, would you like to start?
Always seems to be me at the moment who's first on, unfortunately. Okay, Richard, Cheshire branch, contact. Just to find out generally, do a bit of learning.
Great, thank you. And Hazel.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good morning. Yes, same as Richard really. I used to be involved with the Samaritans donkeys ago and was pretty up to speed on this kind of stuff, but it's ancient history now, so I'm looking for a refresher.
Thank you. And Colin. I think you're on mute, Colin.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Colin Hardy from Northumberland. Here just as a learning curve and to see everybody's happy smiling face. And that's very much it.
And Elaine.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, I'm Elaine Coates from the campaigns rep from the Mid-Kent branch, and like everyone else, I'm just here to learn a bit because I'm curious.
Great. And Divya.
Hi, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Divya Pandit. I'm new to this, so I just wanted to see what it's all about. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to have you here, Divya. And who else? Vincent.
Hi, I'm Vincent from the Merseyside branch. I'm aware I'm far from apolitical. I have quite strong opinions one way, so I'd like to make sure I'm toeing the line and sticking within the rules.
Great. And Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue, Norfolk, Norwich and Waveney branch, and here to learn.
Great. And Christine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Like everyone else, really. I think I did this many years ago, so I want to refresh my knowledge because I'm sure I'm guilty of some things unintentionally. So, yeah, just to catch up with things.
Great. And Nuria, would you like to say hello?
Hello, hi. My name is Nuria and I'm recent new here, so I'm really happy to meet you all and listen from today's session. Thank you.
Great. And finally, I think Doug.
Hello, good morning, everybody. This is all new to me as well, so it'll be interesting to find out what's going on today. Thank you.
Great. I think that was everyone. And
no.
Oh, sorry, was it not? Sorry.
Dave. Dave?
Yeah. Dave. Sorry, Dave.
No problem. No problem.
You moved. I was following the. Yeah. Sorry. Go for it.
Really, look, I'm Dave from the campaign's Contact 3 Surrey branch and West Sussex North branch, and I guess it would be. I live with MND, so it would be pretty tough to get thrown in the slammer. So I'm up here to get refreshed. Cheers.
Super. Sorry, Dave. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to double check I've said. We've got colleagues Daniel, Lana and Joe as well on the line. So I think I'm going to pass it on over to Susie and Alison, if that's all right.
Excellent. Sorry, I was having IT problems. It wouldn't let me unmute. Thank you, everyone. Great to see so many people and so many. I'm not allowed to say old. I got told off for saying long established and also new volunteers. It's great to see so many of you. So we're going to be talking through 2 areas of charity law. So the Charity Commission guidance, and for those of you that might have done this in the past, the Lobbying Act, which has come in more recently, which Alison is going to talk us through. We've got a few slides that Fran will be able to share with you after the session because there's some links and stuff in there. Alison, are you able to click up on the slides and do a screen share?
Yep, I'll give it a go.
Excellent. Fingers crossed. And I will shout next slide every now and then. Yep.
Has that worked? Does that work?
Yes. Yes. Excellent.
Yes.
Good. Yes. I think we need to go on to slideshow. I think. Yeah. Yeah. Yay. Excellent. Fabulous. Cool. So yes, welcome everyone. Yeah, I'm Susie. I'm head of policy and campaigns, and Alison is our public affairs manager. And yeah, she'll be covering the session with us today. Obviously, if you do have a question as you go on, do ask, and then hopefully we'll have opportunity at the end for some sort of questions and further more detailed discussions. But if anything isn't clear, then if you wave as we go on, and Fran will alert us to the fact that you have a query. So, Alison, next slide. I think we've done that one. Cool. Thank you. Next one. Yeah. So first of all, what I wanted to talk us through was the Charity Commission. So as a charity, we are regulated by the Charity Commission that regulates charities in England and Wales and maintains the charity register. They're an independent, non-ministerial government department who are accountable to Parliament. And I'm not sure we've got enough from Northern Ireland on
Stop
time.
listening.
And the Charity Commission in Northern Ireland which separately regulates charities in Northern Ireland, but very much in the same way as the Charity Commission in the UK. You do next slide, Alison. Fabulous. So a registered charity is an organisation that is established and operated for charitable purposes and must devote its resources to charitable activities and be registered with the Charity Commission. So that sounds very dry and legal, but as we will come on to in a minute, that's actually quite an important bit. Cool. Next slide, Alison, please. So basically, to be a charity in England and Wales, we have to satisfy the definition of a charities under the Charities Act, and there's a link there to the government definition of what is a charity from the Charities Act. So if we can ping on to the next one, Alison.
Can you come?
So that's basically the descriptions of charitable purposes, which we come as a charity. We're probably under D as the advancement of health, but basically in order to be a charity, which is actually quite useful because it allows you to access more funds. We have tax breaks, we can get things like gift aid on donations, so money from the government for that, and also certain areas of funding are only available to registered charities. So there's definite great advantages to being a registered charity, but it does mean that there's certain things that we can't actually do or need to be very careful about doing because we are a registered charity. So if you could ping on to the next one, Alison. Cool. So this is the kind of important bit. What can we as a registered charity do and not do? To be a registered charity, our main organisation's purpose must be for charitable purpose for the public benefit. If an organisation's purpose is a political, then it's not considered to be a charity. Many charities do undertake work that's political, such as political campaigning that we'll come on to in a minute, but we can undertake that only if it's supports the charity business activities. We can't work to further the interests of a political party, and we do need to remain independent and balanced in our involvement with different parties, particularly during elections. So that's really key. There's guidance from the Charity Commission around how we engage with parties, and that's really a lot clearer around when there are elections that Alison will come on to shortly. So could you ping on to the next slide, Alison? So yeah, some fun bedtime reading for later. So the Charity Commission's guidance on campaigning is called CC9, and there's a link to it there. So the Charity Commission recognises that charities, you know, it's right for charities to have a strong and assertive voice. They often speak for people who are powerless, who can't make the case themselves, or they support people to make the case themselves. They're about confronting social injustice, and they really have a major role to play in public life. But there is sort of, you know, limits to what we can do, particularly around the sort of political activity. And we will go through that in a minute. If you could ping to the next one, Alison. Cool. So what we can't do is we can't support a particular political party. We can support particular issues, but we do need to make sure that we are neutral and balanced in our approach and our engagement to political parties. And we can campaign on political issues as long as it's in the nice legal bit from the Charities Act, in furtherance of our objects, and it's not our continued and sole activity. And that's quite an important one to bear in mind. So we can do campaigning, but we can't solely exist as a campaigning organisation. For the association, obviously, we deliver services, we provide support. It's a range of activities that we undertake, but you can't be a registered charity and solely just undertake political activity. Could we ping on to the next one, Alison? So that means that people like us, Guide Dogs, MS Society, NSPCC, for instance, are all registered charities. Amnesty, for instance, is not a registered charity. It's UK section. Its membership arm basically solely undertakes campaigning and communications activity and political activities, and so it's not a registered charity. So I think there might be times where people say, oh well, I saw someone else do this, they did that, why are we worrying about that? It's probably because they're not actually a registered charity, and we are. So there are stronger limits on what we can do in the political realm as a registered charity. Next one, Alison. Cool, our favourite subject. So up until now, we have basically what we've undertaken has been guided by, the Charities Act and what the Charity Commission said. And then in 2014, the government brought through a lovely bit of legislation called the Lobbying Act, which probably has made our life in public affairs probably a fair bit harder, and certainly for the next couple of general elections. And Alison's got the delightful and fun task of talking us through the Lobbying Act and what that means for us.
Okay, thanks, Susie. Yeah, so back in 2013, the government decided, the coalition government at the time, decided that they needed to clean up politics a bit. We'd had the MP expenses scandal in 2009, and they felt that lobbying also needed a bit of cleaning up. So they brought in the Lobbying Act, which actually its full title is the Transparency of Lobbying, Non-Party Campaigning and Trade Union Administration Act. So a bit of a mouthful, and you can understand why most people stick to the Lobbying Act. It's much shorter. So it was brought in 2014, and it was brought in to regulate campaigning in the run-up to elections. So it brought in new rules for charities, non-governmental organisations and campaigning groups that were undertaking public-facing campaigns. The key issue for charities that it brought in was the idea of a third-party campaigner. So instead of laws just being applied to political parties, there was this new definition of a third-party campaigner, which us as a charity fell into. And a third-party campaigner is defined as an individual or organisation that spends money on regulated activity and expenditure that occurs during the regulated period. Those two things are quite important. So the regulated activity and the regulated period, and I'll come on to talk about those in a second. So the regulated period, so that is a set period of time leading up to an election, and it was set at 365 days prior to an election, so a whole year. So it's really quite a long period of time that activity is regulated. When the Fixed Term Parliaments Act came in 2011, which set general elections at fixed points every 5 years, that should have meant that the regulated period was clear. But as you all know, we've just had 2 snap elections. So for the 2015 general election, we knew exactly when the regulated period started. So it started on the 7th of May in 2014, a whole year before the 2015 election was due. But for the 2017 and 2019 elections, we obviously weren't aware they were going to happen until quite short period of time beforehand. So we would have been in the regulated period without actually knowing it. So that is a sort of major fault of the law, is that charities and others are being regulated when they don't even know that they're within the regulated period. So yeah, I've just said that it can be applied retrospectively the year before an election day. So what is regulated activity? So activity needs to meet two criteria in order for it to be regulated. The first one is a purpose test. So activity has to be actions which can reasonably be regarded as intended to influence voters. So for us, we really shouldn't be doing this. So we shouldn't actually meet the purpose test if what we're doing, you know, is best practice, because what we do as a charity, we shouldn't be out to influence voters. We should be impartial and balanced, as Susie's just said. So in theory, we shouldn't meet that test. The second test is about how public your activity is. So, you know, is it activity which is aimed at, seen, heard by, or involve the public? And our campaigning during general election periods is that we want to be seen and heard by the public. So we would meet that test. But as I've just said, we shouldn't meet the purpose test, or we intend not to meet the purpose test, but that is, you know, that is up for interpretation, the purpose test. So if we stick to what we should do, we shouldn't meet those tests, so we shouldn't be doing regulated activity. But it does depend on views of others of our work, not just what we intended, if that makes sense. So what are the spending limits during the regulated period? So, sorry, bit of technological challenge there. So the spending limits are £20,000 on qualifying expenditure for a UK campaign. Different limits apply if it's a localised campaign or a joint campaign. And there were also upper limits on spending, both UK-wide and locally. If you expect to reach these levels, you have to register with the Electoral Commission. So in the early days, when charities were panicking a bit about this new law, there was a lot of talk about who was going to register and who wasn't going to register with the Electoral Commission, because you have to register before you start campaigning. So it's about anticipating how much activity you're going to do and how much would meet both the purpose test and the public test during the regulated period. So you have to sort of predict what you're going to do and how that might land in advance. But actually, in the end, I think most charities didn't register. In fact, very few do register because of what I said earlier about you shouldn't be meeting the purpose test. So should we campaign during elections? I think the answer is yes. I think we all know the answer is yes. You can achieve a lot through campaigning, and elections are a good opportunity to promote our views, to grow our supporter base, and to raise our profile. So we should definitely be campaigning during elections. And in the last 4 general elections, we have run campaigns and asked candidates to pledge support. So I thought I'd do a quick quiz. You're probably all on mute actually, aren't you? So who can remember, does anybody remember what our campaign was in 2010? I'm not sure if anybody was around working in that period. It's all very quiet.
Nice guideline. I wasn't around.
Oh, Dave, very good. Yes, almost, almost. It was actually called the National Strategy for MND, because at that time the Labour government, the last Labour government, was publishing national strategies for different conditions. So that was our campaign focus. But of course, when the coalition government came in 2010, they ditched all national strategies because that was so last year. And so we had to sort of switch our focus to a nice guideline instead. So yes, I'll give you that one. 2015. Who can remember what our campaign was on in 2015? Racking your brains now.
Don't let us die without a voice, was it?
Oh, you're on fire, Dave, today. Yes, don't let me die without a voice.
I've fortunately been around too long.
So that was Charlie with the blue hair. You may remember the images, and that was all around communication aids and access to communication aids, which were a problem at the time. 2017, you can remember that one.
Access to benefits, wasn't it, I think?
Nearly. Scrap reassessments.
Scrap
So
reassessments,
that was when PIP reassessments, even if you were on the highest rates for PIP, you would still be reassessed if you had a progressive condition, which was a waste of time and a waste of public money. So, and that's the campaign we were successful with and got rid of those reassessments. And then hopefully you can all remember what we did last year. Everybody's too modest to so scrap 6 months. That was our focus last year. So that's what we've done over the last four years, and so far we've been successful not to be reported to the Electoral Commission for any of those. So I think we've sort of played by the rules, which is great. But not all charities do. So I'm going to go through some case studies now of 2 charities that have ended up in hot water over what they've done. The first one was the Family and Childcare Trust, and Susie and I couldn't quite find which hashtag they'd used for their campaign. I think they probably deleted all records of it, but basically the Labour Party were campaigning using a hashtag that the Family and Childcare Trust quite liked. So they adopted the same hashtag as the Labour Party in their tweets and to raise awareness of that issue, which, as sort of Susie's talked about under CC9 and under the Lobbying Act, you can't do. It's okay for you to have a hashtag and then for a political party to adopt it, but it can't be the other way around, because that could be interpreted as you supporting that political party. So they got into trouble with that one. And then one which you may remember was Oxfam. So they ran a campaign called The Perfect Storm. And this was, I think, in the run up to the 2015 election, where they were basically campaigning against sort of austerity. And this was the poster they ran. So talking about 0-hour contracts, high prices, benefits cuts, employment and childcare costs. And they were reported to the Charity Commission by some Conservative MPs who thought that was inappropriate. And the Charity Commission concluded that Oxfam should have done more to avoid misperception of political bias in its poster, but they accepted that the charity had no intention of acting in a party political way. So they had a bit of a rap over the knuckles, but no sort of action was taken against them. So what are the lessons for us in our campaigning? So making sure we're impartial, ensuring if we like or share social media posts, we do it evenly across parties, so that on your feed, your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed, there's a mixture of tweets from different parties during an election period, and well, all year I suppose, but particularly during the regulated period. We have to make sure we're not supporting parties or candidates. And we have to make sure trustees, staff and volunteers are impartial if their social media profile links back to the association. So if you have a Twitter account which identifies you as an active member of the MND Association, a campaigns contact, then you have to remain impartial on that Twitter account. What else? So we need to remember that during an election, everyone is just a candidate. So that includes the sitting MP. MPs no longer exist as soon as an election period starts, so you have to treat everybody the same. So if you're writing to a candidate or inviting them to an event, you need to invite them all, and not just the sitting MP who was in the post before. And during the regulated period, you shouldn't use photos of candidates on your website or leaflets. So that includes pictures of whoever was previously the sitting MP. Things charities shouldn't do during an election. So trustees or supporters appearing in a candidate's election literature. So during elections, we all get leaflets posted through our front doors with lovely bright pictures of happy people in them. And we need to make sure that, you know, MND t-shirts aren't in the shot, or trustees that can be linked back to us cannot be in candidates' political materials. And trustees can't sign letters in support of a political party's policy. And charities can't support one political party's policy. We can compare factual differences in party policy on our issues of concern, but we can't do it in a way that encourages someone to vote in a certain way. So, for example, manifestos. So in the run-up to an election, all political parties publish their manifestos, and as a charity we could compare, for example, what each party was saying on benefits reform, welfare reform. That's okay, but then actually saying underneath something like, you know, so obviously we think the Conservative Party would be the best party to meet the needs of people with MND. You can't do that bit, but you can compare the factual difference between the policies in manifestos. And you can't encourage members or beneficiaries to vote a certain way, so we couldn't, as a charity, come out in support of one party or other. And you can't use charity buildings to advertise a certain political party, so the posters that some people put up in their windows in the run-up to an election, we couldn't have any of those at the London office or in our Northampton office. That's not allowed. And that's it for me. So it's a quick run through. So yeah, any questions, any comments, any reflections?
Thanks, Alison. I think I think I mentioned this at the start, but it would be good if you can just put an asterisk in the chat box if you do have a question, and then I can yeah, I can go to you and ask you to speak if that's all right. Hi, Vincent.
Hello. Just one regarding inviting candidates to events, like all the candidates. Our ball fell just outside of the election period. It was very nearly in it, but I think it went back by a week. Stephen Twigg was attending, but in his role as patron of the branch. So even though he's only theoretically would have been a candidate if it was in the period, would we have had to rescind the invite if we couldn't have invited all the other candidates? Or are we allowed to do it if they have different roles with us? If that makes sense.
That's a very good question. I was wondering whether Susie was going to answer that, or do you want me to? So I think, and it'd be interesting to know what Susie thinks, as she's got quite a lot of experience in this area. So I think that because it's the regulated period, then I think you probably would have to, because presuming he was going to make a speech, I suppose it depends what he was going to be doing at the event. If it was a sort of private capacity, he was attending to have a nice evening and enjoy the meal, and he wasn't speaking, then I think that would be fine. But if he was in any kind of sort of formal capacity attending to speak, then that would be different, and you probably would have then needed to invite others.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Susie.
Sorry, I was having muting problems. I thought, why can Alison not hear me? She's just frowning at me. Yeah, sorry, I think my mic hadn't turned itself off. Yeah, I think I'd agree with Alison. I think if it was during the regulated period, then yes, you would have have had to either invite everyone or rescind the invitation. And I suppose the invite everyone is another sort of discussion we usually have every time in the office. We have a sort of debate about which are the main parties, and we usually have a discussion about the fact that we're not actually going to write to a sort of far right party or something. So it's about sort of making that decision and being clear why you've made that decision as well. So we usually write to the main parties, you know, and as part of the process, but we usually have to make a quite clear and sort of conscious discussion in the office and make sure there's a record of that to say we have decided at the last election these are the 3 or 4 main parties that you know are and those are the ones we are engaging with, so that we don't end up having to sort of engage with some sort of particularly sort of far right parties. But I think, yeah, it's a sort of interesting one, particularly when elections have, despite the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, sort of popped up somewhat unexpectedly over the last few years. But I think if you had gone ahead and just had Stephen Twigg there, you would have risked having a complaint, particularly if he'd spoken from other candidates who may have considered that an unfair advantage, and they could potentially have complained to the Charities Commission about that.
Well, thank goodness it was outside the period.
Yeah.
Because we had 2 candidates, MPs, and an MEP, all from the same office. That would have been a nightmare.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah.
Just to follow on from that, actually, every time, I think it's the Electoral Commission publishes a list of what it deems to be the main political parties. So you don't have to invite all 25 candidates if you live in a constituency that has lots of minor parties standing. So they do sort of give some guidance on who are the main political parties. So it's not everybody.
I assume that would include, say, the sitting MP was an independent. I assume that would include the previous sitting if they were not part of one of the main parties.
That's an interesting question. That's quite a growing trend, or at least wasn't it, at the last election, where a few who had, you know, lost the Tory whip stood as independents. I'm not sure it would, although, yeah, I don't think it would in theory, although the Electoral Commission would probably give a view on that. They're very helpful, actually. I found you can phone them up and they will sort of give you advice over the phone. So if there ever was sort of a question like that, we could ask for some advice from them.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your answers.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thanks for the question, and thank you, Addison. Is there Sue?
Does the same apply to local councillors as for MPs? Because we have sometimes had Joe Mooney as a councillor, but because he lost his brother to motor neurone disease, he's come to our branch open meetings. And we haven't invited all of the councillors from all of the areas that cover our branch area. How careful do we need to be on that?
I think if you're not in an election period, then, I mean, obviously, yeah, potentially your branch or group might actually have quite a lot of councillors, you know, in your area. So, yeah, obviously, if you engage with a councillor previously, you know, and they're interested in attending your events, I think that is fine. I think if well, local elections all got a bit bumped this year, isn't there? There will be some local elections happening next year, probably. You'd have hoped. Certainly Wales, I think, is having Welsh Assembly elections probably next May as well. So I think in the run up to a local or national, in the case of Wales, election, yes, you need to be carefuler. But I think in general, I think it's okay to engage with a sort of an interested councillor if we're not in a sort of a period in the run up to an election.
And is it still the same 1 year time frame in the run up to the local elections?
Let me think about that. Probably not. Is it? What do you think, Alison? I'm just thinking in terms of yeah. I think the main concerns with the Lobbying Act were around sort of national elections, and I think we did, as charities, get into a sort of mass panic, particularly in 2015 when it came in and went, oh my God, well, we're going to have to register, we're going to do it, and then I think everyone calmed down a little bit after that, because about 2 charities registered and everything mostly was fine. I think a few people did a few things and got wrist slaps, but generally, I'm going to say this is being recorded, isn't it? I was going to say, I mean, not only do you have to do something wrong, you also have to be reported by somebody to the Charity Commission. So the Charity Commission don't go out and trawl to find charities doing something wrong. Someone actually has to complain about you, which often is a particularly, it is a quite often is a local Tory MP, I think, that's complained. So in the case of the Oxfam, it was the sort of Conservative MPs that complained. I think at the last election, I think a Hindu temple stuck an enormous Vote Labour poster on their one of their towers, and the local Tory MP complained about that. So someone does have to complain, but that's not a cop-out, I don't think. We do need to make sure that we're not doing something that would get us complained about. But I think in terms of engage with your local councillors, I don't think you've got a year beforehand. So I think it's just probably in the election, once the election is called locally, that you need to be more careful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Richard.
Yeah, well, actually, I've got a follow-up to that one, because I thought you actually said earlier on it applied to any elections, including local elections. And the problem that, it needs checking up, because we're one of these peculiar councils where they have half the council voted on one year and the other half voted on another year. So it's almost continuous if it's a 365 day at locally with us.
I will check that for you and let you know. My feeling is that it's national elections only that it applies to. That's my experience, but I will check that technicality and let you know.
Thank you.
So it would apply to the Welsh Assembly or Welsh Government, Welsh Parliament, sorry, and Northern Ireland executive elections, but I don't think to local elections, but I will check that.
Thanks, Alison. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, it doesn't look like you do. That's fine. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my camera on. And well, yeah, thank you for joining us, and thank you to Susie and Alison for presenting that was really interesting. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything, I'll send as we recorded the session, I'll share a recording and as well as the slides. So if you want to revisit them at any point, especially because there's some links in the different slides.
Just before we go, actually, sorry,
yeah.
just to mention that the Lobbying Act has had quite a chilling effect on charity campaigning, which we think is a really bad thing, actually, and we think charities are too sensitive about it generally, and I know of charities who have stopped doing any kind of campaigning in general elections because of it, which I think is a real shame, because it's a great opportunity to influence government policy on key issues. So I think we definitely need to keep doing it. So I don't want anybody to go away and think that they need to really worry about this, because we do still need to be out there and pushing our issues. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, really.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, Alison. I mean, I think in 2015, a lot of charities did do a sort of mass panic, and sort of every conversation I think I had with our comms manager in the charity I was working with at the time just went, oh, Lobbying Act. And, as the MND Association, we have done some amazingly successful campaigning over the last 4 or so general elections. I think Alison would have to be the historic record of remembering the ones before that. But I'm sure it's great work previous to that some of us weren't around for. And it's been really important stuff. I think, yeah, I agree that there's been a lot of nervousness. I think particularly around doing things in coalition, people have been quite nervous around as well, because obviously the Lobbying Act has those, I think generally as charities we avoided doing anything that is covered by the Lobbying Act, but I think people did get very nervous about doing things jointly because of the, you know, if there was a complaint and people looked into activity, would we jointly be doing activity that would cost more than £20,000 or something? And so I think it certainly made people more nervous about doing things jointly as well, which is a big shame. But I think the number of complaints to the Charity Commission and the Electoral Commission about charities have been pretty small, and it's been where people have done something a bit stupid, really, like sticking a whopping great big Vote Labour poster on their charity's building, or having their trustee sign a letter supporting the Conservative Party's business policy or something with the name of their charity on it. And so you have to do something quite obvious and quite that you really shouldn't do, and possibly slightly dim, to get yourself reported. And we should all be aware of the things we should and shouldn't do. But if you do have any questions, or you're wondering, oh, should we do this? Should the branch do this? Is this a little bit political? Then, you know, do just get in touch with Fran or Alison or me or someone in the team and just ask. We're happy to respond to any queries you might have, because it's best to check and not do something and then be okay to do it, rather than wait, you know, doing something and then yeah, having to sort of backpedal once we get. We want to avoid having a wrist slap. That's the main thing. But we can help you to make sure that we don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to add to that, actually, it's generally agreed that the Lobbying Act is a really badly drafted piece of legislation. And over the last sort of 6 years, lots of attempts have been made to make the government to amend it. But so far, there's not been parliamentary time for that. But it is an ongoing problem, and lots of people think it does need to be urgently amended, because things like, you know, the regulated period applying retrospectively for snap elections, you know, that shouldn't be happening. People shouldn't be worrying the whole time that they're in a regulated period. So yeah, lots of flaws in the legislation, and it does need to be revamped and amended.
Sorry, just before we go, Colin's just put an asterisk in the box. Colin, would you like to ask your question?
I work alongside my local MP during the election period, and I've removed the MND campaign contact and any link from my Twitter and Facebook feed. My MP comes to this house. We have drinks together. I acted as an agent during the election campaign. Am I contravening your rules?
Thanks for that question, Colin. No, I think that's absolutely fine if you want to do that in your personal life. I think what we wouldn't want is you in a nice blue MND Association T-shirt on the front of his leaflet, or mentioning in. Yeah.
I've not mentioned that one.
Well, pretend you didn't say that, Colin, for next time. Don't be on his front of his leaflet wearing your nice blue T-shirt. And also, yeah, if there's no mention in your Twitter feed of your link to the association, then that's fine. We're not here to censor people's personal lives and personal views. It's just making sure that there's not that link back publicly to the charity, really. Yeah, we'll raise a small eyebrow about the T-shirt and... yeah, shush, we didn't know that. No one knew that. No.
And it's great, Colin, that you're so embedded in that system locally, and you know that will benefit, I'm sure, your work locally. So that's a positive. So as long as you keep the two separate, I think that's absolutely fine.
It does. I mean, because of MND, I got heavily involved in the local council, and I'm actually on the COVID hardship funding panel for Northumberland County Council. There's 3 of us give funds to people in desperate need. And without working alongside them, we wouldn't have had that position. And it also allows us to open doors for the association. But I am aware that other people don't feel the same politically as I do. But the first supporter that's coming along to take part in our awareness day is my local Labour MP, who will be supporting our Extend a Hand on Twitter.
Brilliant.
No, that's fabulous. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so I think, you know, it's great. We do have some people who are very active in the political parties locally, and, you know, it's been great. We've been able to, you know, to utilise that. I think we've been to party conferences in the last few years with some volunteers, and, you know, we've had volunteers who were very engaged in that political party who've gone along to conference with us, and that's been really useful. So we're more than happy for you to do that. It's just making sure there's not that sort of public, you know, visible link on social media, but more than useful. And yeah, to actually have those links and, you know, those contacts.
All right. Thanks again to Susie and Alison, and for everyone for joining. And yeah, do get in touch if you have any questions or anything. Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. See you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye.